Well, hey, church, it is a delight to be with you again with this next episode of First Looks. And I will be inviting you into just some of my beginning stages of my sermon preparation process. Now, I've been doing these for a few weeks now, and I have noticed, this is going to shock you all, that I've been going a little longer and longer each time. So, in an effort to keep these a little shorter and a little more watchable, I'm not going to go through all of the cross references and some of that initial just groundwork that I do before I start annotating a PDF document here. And so I'm just going to dive on in to this passage. And so join me as we take a look at a new series, a new book of the Bible that we're going to begin this upcoming Sunday. And this is Hebrews chapter 1. And this is verses 1 through 3. And so that's where we're at. We're going to begin a series through the book of Hebrews that's going to take us a couple months because we are going to take some big chunks at a time. But on this first message that we have, we are going to aim for a little bit of an intro to the book. We're going to look at some main themes for us to take note of. And we are going to look at the opening verses as just kind of our launching point. Now, when we think about what Hebrews is all about, the big idea of this book, the main idea of Hebrews is this: Jesus is supreme. And because Jesus is supreme, the last few chapters of this book, the book of Hebrews, is all about responding to Jesus's supremacy. Ooh. Supremacy. Okay, I got a little crazy there with my writing. We'll just clean it up a little bit. All right. Jesus's supremacy. All right. Now, some of the things that we will see, and if you have familiarity with this book, then you'll be right on track with what I'm saying. We see that Jesus is supreme. He is supreme over angels, Moses, Joshua, rest, Sabbath rest, priesthood. He's supreme over the sacrificial system, sacrifices. He's supreme over the old covenant in general. Jesus is just supreme. He's supreme over all of what we had been reading through our Old Testament. He is better. All of what we found in the Old Testament is pointing to Christ as the fulfillment, the substance of which all of this Old Testament stuff was a type and shadow. Okay? And so we want to keep this on the forefront of our minds because for us to open up this book, we have to have the whole book as one work, one literary work. We have to have all of it in our minds so that we rightly interpret and rightly handle all of the parts. You get into real trouble when you take one part of this book away from the rest of the context of its whole theme that's running throughout of it. You can start to get goofy, especially in some places around chapter 6, chapter 10, where you have some of the apostasy passages in which you really get into some difficult theological predicaments if you just kind of isolate those verses. We don't want to do that, so we want to carry the overarching themes. We want to keep those in our minds as we go through each part of this. Okay, so with that, let's just go ahead and peek at our opening verses and go from there. So I'm going to switch colors just so we can help distinguish here. Okay, so long ago. Okay, so we see long ago, and then let me go ahead and read this one time for us all the way through. Long ago, at many times and in many ways, God spoke to our fathers by the prophets. But in these last days, he has spoken to us by his Son, whom he appointed the heir of all things, through whom also he created the world. He is the radiance of the glory of God, the exact imprint of his nature, and he upholds the universe by the word of his power. After making purification for sins, he sat down at the right hand of the Majesty on high. All right, there's our passage. So we start out long ago, and then if we look in verse 2, we see in these last days. So we immediately have contrast going on here. We have many times, in many ways, okay? And then finally, though, he has spoken to us by his Son, okay? In many times, in many ways, God spoke by the fathers and by the prophets right there. So, a couple notes for us straight out of the gates. We are talking about God's revelation of himself. Okay, we're talking about God's revelation of himself, and what we see is that he used to do this. All right, used to use various means, various occasions, okay, or various times is what our text says. So, and number 3, he used various people, okay. So many times, all right, various times, in many ways, various means. And so we could see perhaps David writing from personal reflections as a shepherd out in the wilderness, having maybe been just delivered from the hand of a bear by God's provision of defense for him. And now he is writing as a response poetry song, one of the Psalms that we have. That might be one of the means. Another one of the means might be the case of Jeremiah, where God directly dictates to him. Jeremiah, go ahead and get your scribe, okay? And I'm gonna tell you what to write. Here's what you write down. Write this down, okay? So that is. We also see something a little different when Moses receives the law from God on Mount Sinai, and so we want to, for the sermon, we will want to search a sampling of the means. So I'm going to want to think through that, do some searching around in the scriptures so that I can give you a sampling of those. I just kind of spitballed a couple of them off the top of my head. I will want to look at different circumstances / contexts throughout Israel's history in which God revealed himself. I want to give a sampling of those, and I want to take a sampling of some of the various individuals. Who were they? You know that we're going to have of the prophets, some who were farmers, some who were from priestly lines. You're going to have shepherd boys like David. You're going to have kings. You're going to have the wisdom of Solomon in there. You're going to have judges. You're going to have so many different people who all were used by God to reveal himself to his people. So we want to have this in mind, because one of the things that we want to be keen on. Look at this right here. God spoke to our fathers by the prophets. Why do I highlight that? This is why I highlight that. Because struggling here. There we go. Because our fathers indicates. Oh boy. There we go. Our fathers, this indicates the audience of Hebrews. All right. Now the title might give it away, but this letter was written to the Hebrews. It's written to Israel. Okay. Now, not Israel as a part of the nationalistic Old Covenant people of God, but Israel, meaning Jews who embraced Jesus as Messiah. That's who we're talking about when we say Israel in the New Covenant. Hebrew people who were part of God's Old Covenant people, who now recognize Jesus to be the fulfillment of all that they anticipated. Okay? And so what we'll know from doing a little bit more commentary research and things like that, or if you're just familiar with the book, one of the things that we'll learn very quickly is that there were Jews who embraced Christ as the Messiah, became Christians, but because of the persecution coming upon the Christian people, they were being tempted to walk away from the name of Jesus and to return to their old Jewish roots when times were a little easier for them, because Judaism was not as persecuted at this time as it had been throughout their national history by, say, Assyria, Babylon, even Rome with Antiochus IV Epiphanes. They've been persecuted for sure as a people group, but in this particular time, they had been given a level of peace by Rome at this time, but the Christians, they were being persecuted, and so there's this temptation to turn away, to walk away from the faith, to apostatize. And this is a letter urging these people to press on in their faith, to hold fast what they know to be true about the supremacy of Jesus Christ. Okay, so in these last days, Jesus is the final revelation of God. He is the fullness, the final revelation. He is the embodied, or we could say incarnate, here we go, Word of God. And we are initially just, John 1 is screaming out to us right now as a cross-reference, that in these last days spoken to us by his Son, whom he appointed the heir of all things. That's screaming out some Colossians 1:15 and following. Go ahead and look that up if you'd like. Sometime John 1, in the beginning was the Word was with God, the Word was God. All things were created through him and for him. And so there we go. We have creation of the world is going to draw back to Colossians 1. It's going to point over to John 1. Oh, this is good. This stuff is just gold. Okay. He is the radiance of the glory of God. Now, there's another cross-reference here too, that, and I'm going to actually go to this one. So let me go ahead and pull up. Let me pull up my Bible. I got a lot going on here. Okay, here we go. 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 4. Okay, there we go. In their case, the God of this world has blinded the minds of the unbelievers to keep them from seeing the light of the gospel of the glory of Christ, who is the image of God. Okay, so there it is. For what we proclaim is not ourselves, but Jesus Christ is Lord, with ourselves as your servants, for Jesus' sake. For God, who said, "Let light shine out of darkness," has shone in our hearts to give the light of the knowledge of the glory of God in the face of Jesus Christ. And so that is a really excellent cross-reference for us. So 2 Corinthians 4 and following. Oh goodness, this the way that the Bible holds hands with itself is just so cool. It is so cool. The more you read the Bible, the more interconnections you find, which shows the complexity of this book and shows that this is something that has been sovereignly guided by God. It truly is His word. In no way could all of these different authors throughout centuries write such a coherent, interconnected, singular text. Even though 66 books, it's one single book. And we see that there. And so one of the things that we want to emphasize with all of this is heir. He's the heir of all things. He's the creator of the world, and He is the radiance of the glory of God. He is the exact imprint of God's nature. He is the upholder of the universe by the word of His power. And after making purification, He sat down at the right hand of the Majesty on high. So what we have going on right here is a whole heap of beautiful Christology. Okay. This right here is what shall we say here? A summary synthesis of essential Christology. Christology being the study of the second person of the Trinity, who is Jesus Christ. And so we learn about His work. And so, goodness, how am I going to fit this all into one sermon? Oh boy. So creator of the world, Colossians talks about that, but we might even go back to Genesis 1 roots, because we know that this is written to Hebrews. The heir of all things, we might look into 2 Samuel 7, Davidic covenant. That's Davidic covenant right there. The radiance of the glory of God. We might be going to the Shekinah glory in tabernacle / temple passages. The exact imprint of His nature. Goodness, now this is actually a pretty complex deal right there, because when we talk about the imprint of His nature, it's the Hebrew word tselem, and we might say it is image of God language. Now, when we think of image of God, what do we think of? We think of humanity. And so we have to ask the question, is the exact imprint of His nature, is that a reference to Jesus being the ultimate image bearer of God as being fully human? Or is this His deity? We're going to have to make, and you know what, it's so complex, it's so, it's just beautiful stuff here that, I can't wait to just dive on into this. But because we have, Jesus is the final revelation up here to the Son of God. When we come all the way down here to the exact imprint of his nature, and we see all of what's going on here, I'm probably going to be making the case that when you see Jesus, you see God. And that is some Johannine language from John's gospel. If you have seen me, you have seen the Father. Let me write that in right there. John, if you have seen me, you have seen the Father. John's got that kind of stuff all over the place in his gospel. Oh, goodness. And he upholds the universe. Isn't that a wild thought? That the molecules of my body right now are doing what they're supposed to be doing because Jesus Christ is willfully, volitionally holding it all together. Wow. And he's not just the creator, he is also the purifier. He's the redeemer. Jesus, we could say it like this. Let me get a different color here for this comment here. Jesus is creator. He is one creator. And he is, number two, the recreator. As the redeemer. So he made all things, and he'll make all things new again. And then he sat down at the right hand of the majesty on high. Let's take note of this. He sat down at the majesty. Okay, there are some things here for us. Let's not overlook this. I said this one was going to be shorter, and look at us go. Oh boy. Okay. Two things. Number one, we're going to see from later on in this in the book of Hebrews that high priests don't sit down because the work is never done. So the high priest could never sit down because Israel was never done sinning, and so there was never an end to the sacrificing on behalf of sinful people. But because of the finality of what Christ offered up in himself, he has offered up a once-for-all sacrifice that is able to cleanse past, present, future sins. That's the power of the cross. That's the power of his sacrifice. And he sits down because the job is done. Now, there's also this language right here of majesty on high, and I'm going to need to look at some commentaries on this one, but what comes to mind right there is Daniel chapter 7, Son of Man passage. Jesus referred to himself as the Son of Man more than any other title. He referred to himself as the Son of Man. And when he said that, he was not saying that he was just human. He is saying he is the Daniel 7. He's the Daniel 7 prophetic image come to fulfillment here. And so let's go to it. Where is this at here? Ancient of Days. As I looked, thrones were placed, and the Ancient of Days took his seat. Clothing was white as snow. The hair on his head was like pure wool. His throne was of fiery flames. Its wheels were burning fire. So this Ancient of Days, I don't have time for this right now. Just read this passage, Daniel 7, verse 9 and 10. Then go to Revelation chapter 1 and look at the description of Jesus Christ. Wow. It's the Jesus is God. That's what this is saying. I don't know how we don't see this. For Jehovah's Witness, Mormons, those who downgrade Christ from being fully God. It's all over the place if we look and we see it. But here we go. I saw in the night visions, and behold, with the clouds of heaven there came one like a son of man. He came to the Ancient of Days and was presented before him, and to him was given dominion and glory, a kingdom that all peoples, nations, and languages should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion which shall not pass away, and his kingdom one that shall not be destroyed. That picture in Daniel chapter 7 is talking about Jesus. And so in this right here, I'm going to want to investigate this interconnection right here. So that's a good start for us. We got a lot. There's a ton here. This passage is 3 verses long, and it is jam-packed, loaded with content here, from the blue highlights of the Christology of all that Christ is, from him being the final revelation in and of himself, from his work of redeeming and renewing all things. I don't know how I'm going to do it, church, so pray for me, because I got about 35 minutes to get through all of this here, and we are just starting a book that is chapter after chapter of content like this. Wow, I'm so excited for it. I just finished preaching yesterday, and here we are sitting here in my office on this Monday looking at this passage saying, can I wait another week before we preach again? And so can't wait to be with you guys. I love you so much, and I hope that this is helpful. I hope you're excited for our next series in the book of Hebrews. Church, I love you.